everybody who's on the meeting tonight to keep your microphones muted. Please don't talk over anybody. We have a moderator on here who will and can automatically mute you if he needs to. And we thank everybody for attending the Buildings and Grounds meeting tonight.
Okay, thanks, Jared, for kicking it off. Welcome, everybody. It's March 15th, Building and Grounds Committee. There's not a lot of topics on the agenda, but there's maybe one or two items that we'll spend some time on, or however much time's needed. And those of you who just joined, Mr. Vukovic is going to be a little bit late, but he wanted us to go ahead and get started. So, Jared, were you going to cover the white pines at the East Pike parking lot?
Yes, sir. Mr. Trout is not in attendance tonight. He is away today, so I'll be covering some of his items tonight. The white pines, for anybody who is familiar with the East Pike parking lot, there is a row of white pines up against the back parking lot between our property and the neighbors, or multiple neighbors' properties, the whole way along the back of the property. Over the past probably 2 or 3 years, we have had branches, twice a branch has fallen and hit 2 different employee cars, causing damage. And then there was a neighbor's shed that was hit last year with a falling branch. And we've had other multiple branches, it seems, recently break and fall, luckily not hitting any property. Anytime it has hit a piece of property, whether it's been a vehicle or the neighbor's shed, we have turned that, of course, over to our insurance company, which it is, according to them, just really an act of God that the branches have fallen. So the district has never been liable for that. Unfortunately, that means we've had 2 employees who have had to pay for damages to their car, and we've had a neighbor who's had to pay for damages to his shed because of branches falling from those trees. What we are proposing in order to hopefully help take care of that situation is, at this point, have all those white pines along the back there removed. They have been causing some damage. They tend to be very dirty at times, just with all the needles at times falling off. We have a quote from a local tree service for $3,700 to remove all the white pines that we would be seeking board approval for to get that done here in the spring, if the committee would be willing to make that recommendation.
Okay, thanks. There's no doubt that those things are dirty and create a mess all the time, and then the risk of damage too. I'm guessing that's just cutting them off at the ground. We're going to leave the stumps for that.
Yes, that is just for the full tree removal, not for removing stumps or even doing the stump grinding.
Okay, and that's hauling everything away also.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Schroth, I'm going to go with Barb first since she's on the committee, and then I'll follow up with you. Go ahead, Barb.
I have 2 questions. First question is, are there any ideas of what to do in that area to make it more aesthetically pleasing, replanting trees or shrubs or something?
Good question, Mrs. Barker. That is certainly a conversation we can have once we have them removed and get the stumps removed. We can always put something else in there that would be a little less, maybe not grow as large, and maybe have a better chance of just kind of creating a barrier between us and the neighbors at the same time while looking nice without the potential damage that the current trees can cause.
And that's a good question. The one thing I'll add, though, is that those white pines are not an obstruction. They're just large trees with trunks. They don't create a barrier, a visible barrier between the properties.
And my second question, maybe Walter knows, is those are old white pines. What's the value of white pine? A lot of times when we have cutting done, the cutting's done for free because they take the value of the wood. So maybe Walter, do you know what the current value is right now for white pine? I know lumber's through the roof in the store.
You're on mute, Walter.
Well, I thought I was off of mute. Sorry about that. The reality is there's only a few of those trees there, maybe a dozen or so. If I recall, they're pretty wolfy looking. And the second thing is, yeah, the lumber in the stores is through the roof, but that's because those timber that those guys are buying, they're mills that are set up to kill dry the material and plane it and dress it and make it into regular bill lumber that we all know and use. This question comes to me all the time. People will say to me, Walter, I want to cut this tree down in my backyard, and it's a beautiful looking tree. How much is it worth? And basically, what I really have to tell them is the reality is it's just worth whatever the guy can get out of it to make it go away. There really is very, very little commercial value to them. However, there is something else that maybe that's some resources that our shop classes or those sort of things might be interested in from that perspective. But the reality is there's not a lot of commercial value to it. My question, Jared, is very similar to Barb's. One of the things that I was going to suggest is that you put in there a hemlock hedge, where you plant the hemlock fairly close together. The only problem with it is it does require them to be trimmed every so often, but you can control the height and you can use them as a visual barrier very easily as long as you're willing to go in every year, 1 to 2 years, and trim them and keep the height down and keep them from getting too shaggy looking.
Okay, Julia, I think you were next.
I don't know, when it says lower the hand, raise the hand, I get so mixed up. Sorry. I can see we're not going to win this battle tonight, but I think they're beautiful. And I think anything you plant, you have to take care of. And we never took care of them, but I walk up there sometimes and I appreciate them so much because I love white pines. And maybe the neighbors just are sick of them because they do drop a lot. I mean, they have a lot of, well, I don't think any trees are dirty, but they drop a lot of debris. I think they've needed to be pruned for a long time, and then we don't have to plant anything because we're not going to take care of a hemlock hedge and the deer are going to eat it. So my feeling is that I don't know what you called them, Walter, Wookie or something, Wolfie or something, but I think they're beautiful. And I love white pines, and I think they're gorgeous specimens and deserve a little bit of more respect.
A wolf tree is a beautiful tree from an aesthetic point of view, Julia, but it's terrible from a lumber processing point of view because it's usually full of big bad knots because of all the big heavy branches that are growing out of it. I too would not object to trying to keep them, but they would certainly need trimmed up. And when you say dirty, what's actually happening there is the needles on a white pine tree only last for 2 years, and at the end of the second year they fall off. And so that's part of the natural process of the tree to constantly be dropping those needles, it's often referred to as pine straw. If you're out in the woods, you could actually scrape them up and make a comfortable bed if you're, on an overnight camping in the woods. So I'm a little bit like you, Julie. I'd just as soon not see them go, but I also understand some of the reality, particularly if the neighbors are starting to complain about them.
Well, if we don't have trees, then they'll be mad because they'll be upset because we're bothering too much. So they'll want something planted. And then the reality, it's the same thing all over again. Like those white pines, you have to take care of them. And I don't think our district I think we're okay. We cut the grass and weed whack, but I don't think we have a regular process of dealing and pruning trees. It's expensive, but I think those trees are worth it personally. But I'm not on the committee, so I can't make a recommendation one way or the other. So thank you, Terry, for letting me speak.
Okay, Tom, you're next.
Well, we're really good at cutting things down and not putting anything back. These trees are probably been planted when the school was built. And so this is what happens after 50 years of a white pine. If you do cut them down, we need to put trees back. Any tree you put back is going to cause problems down the line, but we should be planting 3 to 1. So, a hedge doesn't do us any good because these trees were planted as a hedge, as a set of border trees. This is what they do. They grow up. When you plant a 70-foot tree, it grows up. So I'm okay with. There is no commercial value to them. It costs the cutter, the timber guy, more money to move his equipment in than those trees are worth. Taking them down, I'm okay with putting things back on that site. We have way too many sites that are treeless because we're really good at removing stuff and not very good about putting it back. So if we are going to cut them, then we have to make a commitment to putting trees back of some sort or other. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Cinda, go ahead.
Is there a possibility of cutting back every other one and planting a new young white pine in the place? Is there a possibility? I don't know how close they are, if there would be enough light to do that. Or if there are 1 or 2 trees that are the problem trees that are dropping the limbs, maybe they could be cut and have new white pines put in place.
I'd rather not plant white pines back there. I'd rather plant something that's a dwarf. We could still do that, cut down the ones that need cut down and then plant some. And I'm thinking more of a pyramid shaped Christmas tree type that's more of a dwarf variety that's, not going to get, it's a slow grower, and that way we don't have to trim them every couple years.
Is there such a thing as a conifer or Christmas tree type thing that will stay dwarf without being trimmed? Don't they all require trimming?
Terry,
They're hard.
it's called an Alberta Spruce. They're very slow growing, but they are a tree, and they eventually, even if you plant a dwarf, they eventually grow up. But the Alberta Spruce, I have several of them in front of my house. Right now, they're about 8 feet in height. And when I planted them, they were around 3 feet, and that was 21 years ago. So that'll give you some idea about how fast they grow.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem with the dwarf variety, they are more expensive than the non-dwarf, but that'd be, it'd be less maintenance, and we would get more years out of them before they would become a problem. Tom, you still have several. You still have your hands up. I'm not sure.
Oh, we're all gonna chime in on this, Terry. Let's just plant a 6-foot oak tree and let it go for 100 years. There's no requirement that it be an evergreen, and there's no requirement for it to be a hedge.
But I thought that's what we're trying to do, is if we are going to plant something back there, we would plant a barrier.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with dwarf trees is they snap off after 20 years. You know, we have plenty of native trees that would not require maintenance. The last time I trimmed an oak tree was at the base. So, you know, and you can take a look at up on Whippoorwill Avenue, straight up in the up on top of the hill there. Those are 40-year-old oak trees, and they're finally getting to be some size. So, I mean, it just, again, you know, you could do what Cinda suggested, and we could plant a set of trees in between those things. There's not enough density there that they wouldn't grow, and they'll grow until you cut the pines down. And the pines could live, as Julie pointed out, another 25 years. But anything you plant is going to have a problem. But you know, there's no reason that we're not planting trees that become significant in 25 years. Thank you.
We do have a proposal from the same local company for $2,500, basically to do, I believe what Miss Broad suggested was to cut out the problem trees, the main ones that seem to be overhanging the parking lot area, maybe the ones closest to the other people's properties, and that's about 6 of the 11 that are currently there for $2,500. We could cut those ones down immediately and bring back a proposal to the committee of what suggestions as to what we could plant there, whether we just replace the ones that we tore down, or cut down, or we eventually cut them all down and replace them with something else. We could bring back suggestions.
I'm all for that, but let's a couple other people have their hands up. I think Cinda, you wanted to.
Barb's had her hand up for way longer than I.
Okay, Barb, I didn't see. Go ahead.
So when this proposal goes for a board motion, I'm okay with it as long as the motion says, you know, to be replaced with something. So if we, you know, have some more conversation, if we only cut out the problem trees, or if we do take them all, as long as they're replaced with something that's, I don't know if hemlock would be the best, because they do have I believe the fungus that's going around. You know, the borough has an arborist, which the school district could ask for their opinion on what to plant, and they very knowledgeable. And my other second thing is, we always say about getting 3 quotes. So, you know, I would ask that make sure we have 3 quotes, so we know we're getting a good value.
The one other thought I had too is, you know, could this planting new stuff there? We could see if the property owners wanted to plant stuff on their property instead of us planting it on ours. And we could also see if, like, a Boy Scout project or anything like that, or Girl Scout project, or Julia, I think maybe you were next. Yeah.
Well, am I next?
Yes.
I just don't like to cut trees down unnecessarily, particularly ones like that. I just feel like we should have somebody from IUP or the borough come over and look at them and see if we can trim them up. They've needed trimmed since I moved into East Pike, and that's been almost 25 years ago. They've needed trimmed. And, you know, it's like anything else. Before you just tear them down, you know, these white pines can get to be 3 feet around. I mean, they live to be a long time. It's a shame to just, so I know that this is a hard fought battle for old trees that are no longer beautiful, but I don't think they like us either.
Okay, Cinda.
Okay. Walter, I absolutely love Alberta Spruce. I've got some by my patio that have been here for 30 years. And they're gorgeous until they get big and we get one of those heavy snowstorms that takes all the branches and pushes them to the ground, and you end up with big holes. So I don't think that would be, I wouldn't plant them again unless they were in a sheltered place that didn't happen. The other thing, I think Barbara is right, but other than the limbs falling, are we concerned with the needles all over the ground? Is that something, do we go out and attempt to clean them up every year? If we get deciduous trees like the oak trees, we're going to end up having to go out and, pay to have the leaves cleaned up every year and mulched or whatever. But white pine needles, I thought people just kind of left them there for the soft texture and the coating under the trees. I don't know.
Our maintenance crew does have to go through and sweep up the parking lot once or twice as the needles fall. Otherwise, they clog the storm drains and everything else in the parking lot.
Okay. I know that I can't visualize how close they are to the parking lot. So, okay.
Walter.
Yeah, Terry. We also have a county agent from the Penn State Extension Office who might also be able to, if to tag on to what Julie was saying, might also be able to give you some ideas on it. But I actually find the pine straw somewhat attractive because in the fall it does kind of change the look of the area.
Okay, well, let's, I guess, table this item. Jared, it sounds like the committee wants some investigating done by one of the three individuals or agencies that was suggested. So, and it would, like Barb's asking, have some pictures of the trees would help for the next meeting.
Yep, we can see if we can get somebody to come look at them before the next meeting. I mean, it's not a rush. I mean, it's not something that needs done right now, but when Greg gets back, I can have a conversation with him on it.
Okay, sounds good. Moving on to number 2, the upgrades to the high school auditorium sound system. Sounds like from what I'm reading here, you ran into some unforeseen things. So go ahead and cover that.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. We really just wanted to keep the Buildings and Grounds Committee updated. The junior high is moving forward with their upgrades. The senior high is working on theirs. They were, just a little bit behind the junior high. They are in the process of getting 3 different quotes because of the volume that they are buying. It falls within the limits where we cannot just purchase it from one vendor. We can purchase it from one vendor. We just have to have 3 different quotes in order to do that because the equipment is not coming off of some type of state contract. So they're working on the 3 quotes, and we will bring that back to the committee or the board for approval. Right now, they're thinking to totally upgrade the senior high system. It'll be around $40,000. As with the junior high system, $10,000 of that is already budgeted in capital reserve. The remaining, what we feel of $30,000 will come out of the capital reserve as well. But we will have those final numbers for you, hopefully, probably not for Monday's meeting, but hopefully for the April 8th, I believe, April 11th board meeting.
Okay. Tom, you raised your hand.
Yes, Jared, why is can you elaborate on why the high school is more, 50% more expensive than the junior high project?
Mr. Cronin, I can jump in and speak to that. We also have Mr. O'Lear and Ms. Lyons are also on the call too to answer any questions that you have. One of the things that has been it was considered is we need a new Telex system as well, which is a significant expenditure that the junior high didn't need. Some things that are involved in ours are the rerunning of wire and some other speakers and different things. Mr. Alir, I know that you're on here. If you'd like to speak to some of those things, you can
Hey,
chime in as well.
Doug, what's a Telex system?
Good question. That's the headset that they use in-house. Ms. Lyons would be able to speak to that a little bit better. She would be the one that would be operating that. Leah, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So the Telex system is a clear comm system in which a stage manager or director would be able to talk to the rest of the technicians. And the system that we have presently is probably the original to that auditorium. It's about the same age as I am. So right now we only have a one-way system. We do not have a two-channel comm, which is pretty standard. That's actually what I used when I was in high school. The wiring is quite old. The boxes themselves are being held together by duct tape and a prayer. So they're quite old, and we're looking to have a system that is similar or the same as the junior high. And so that's what we're looking to work towards. Also with the Telex system for a senior high, we would like to have one that allows us to have a stage manager in the booth, because right now our students who are looking to go to college for stage management and technical theater, we cannot provide them with the ability to learn how to what is calling a show, because we don't have enough comms or Telex systems for them to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee, or?
Is there anything else you need to clarify, Leah?
For the system itself, or for the whole system, or with Telex?
No, the system itself.
The system itself. Jason, do you want to talk about the sound?
Yeah, I know some of the differences with the junior high. The junior high system, I think, had some things done at the renovation a while back. I know ours include, like theirs doesn't include any repairs. Ours would need all the jacks in front of the stage repair, cabling run, snake. The speakers, the main speakers in the house are bad, and those would need replaced. The junior high doesn't have monitors on theirs, so ours includes monitors, and I mean we're much less than what the junior high was set up. So
our last major upgrade was in 1998, which was over 20 years ago. So we have maintained as long as we possibly could, but things are broken or breaking, so they're past their wear.
Leah, correct me if I'm wrong as well. One of the things that had kind of led to this conversation was the amount of money that we spend in rentals on the equipment every year. How much money do you typically spend in renting the speakers and whatnot to facilitate that in the auditorium?
Yeah, we spend the musical alone. We spend like $600 to $800 just to rent the microphones for that one event, and any other time that we need to rent microphones, it's coming out of that club or that department's budget. So jazz artist or Orchestras Rock or something like that. Or Orchestras Rock has been held at the junior high because we can't provide it here at the senior high. I say here at the senior high, I'm in my basement. The other thing is that as the person who gets people calling to use our space and to rent our space, those come with riders. And I cannot fulfill certain riders because I don't have the equipment to do so. So I don't have a two-way comm. I don't have a stage manager comm. I don't have wireless microphones that I can provide. So I then have to tell people that I can't provide you with that. I can provide you with this. And sometimes they're willing to still come in, but other times then they choose other venues.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Cindy, you raised your hand.
Yeah, Leah, when the other people come in to use our space,
Yes.
do we charge them rent? And
Yeah.
if so, what kind of fees? What kind of income do we typically have? And how much higher would it be if we had the more advanced system?
That would probably be more of a question for Jared, because since I have been with the district, I've only had two other groups be able to come in, and that was their dance groups, because that's not utilizing the microphones as much. Jared, would you be able to speak to what the rental fee is? I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have those sheets right in front of me, but we charge on an hourly basis. And we also charge depending on whether you are not for profit or whether you are a for-profit organization. I want to say off the top of my head, the hourly rate is usually somewhere around $35 an hour for the auditorium. And then we do charge additional for custodial time, any security that's needed, those type of things we would charge for as well. And then if Ms. Lyons had to be there for some reason to help with the system, because most outside people we do not allow to use our sound systems by themselves, we would also then charge for Ms. Lyons' time to be there.
And Leah, I'm not trying to take money away from you, but does the amount that we charge for Leah to be there, does that all go to her, or does the school district keep some of that for using our equipment?
Ms. Lyons would get paid her hourly rate, and we charge, I usually round up, so we charge slightly a little bit more than that for her time. Like I said, she would get paid her hourly rate. But then the charge for the auditorium, anything like that goes directly to the district.
What I'm getting at is it was really wonderful that somebody made a great donation at the junior high. And I'm wondering if we could somehow bring this $40,000 down a little bit on the district side of things. If we could have a fund drive, get interested people to donate, maybe find a big benefactor to donate $5,000. If we could, for each time that the students need to use the facility, say for the play, take $100 out of their club, not 6 or 7 or 8, but $100. And if the public wants to use the auditorium and the sound system, maybe instead of $35 an hour, $50 an hour. Raise the rates a little bit so that every time the auditorium is used, we can try to start getting some of that money back.
And we do, Ms. Brother. I mean, that's an excellent idea. We can certainly review. The board always has the option to review what we charge. That probably has not been updated in a good many years, so we can certainly maybe in a future audit and finance committee meeting take a look at how we do bill outside agencies. And at that time, the board can make a decision if you want to charge student groups when they use the different facilities across the district, because it isn't just the senior high auditorium. Student groups use a lot of the facilities.
Right, and I don't necessarily want to, it didn't start out thinking that I wanted to charge students, but if we're at $40,000 instead of the $10,000 that's budgeted, I realize that more things are wearing and so forth, but this is kind of like the first time that I've heard about this. And if the groups have been managing to rent equipment for the last at least 2 years, I understand, then the funds are there. They are willing and able to raise those funds. Maybe we can figure out a way that everybody can help and not just put it all on the district. Because if we need $40,000 worth of materials, I'd like to do that. But $40,000 is a lot different than the 10 that's budgeted.
And Cindy, I will say that this has been around a while, that this outdated equipment has been known. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, Terry, that we've been ignoring this problem for 8 years now that I've been on the board. It's not getting any better. Also, the high school has a higher level of performance, and it should have a higher level of performance in the junior high. So having equipment that these kids are going to be using in college and beyond would also make sense for an educational point of view. I don't disagree with Cinda that we can certainly ask for some outside funding, but I think we need to actually fix this problem and not leave it for the next board and Leah to have another 4 years of patching things together. This has been an ongoing problem.
Tom, I agree with you. I think too that I'd like to at least move forward with them getting the quotes, but then also see if there is anything that they could do from a fundraising standpoint or outreach. Barb, you had asked whether the stage rigging was replaced at the senior high, and I thought it was. Leah shaking her head yes.
Yes, at the senior high, our main traveler, our main teaser, the rest of the travelers, the legs and the teasers have been all replaced. I believe that was 6 years ago. I could be wrong on the years. Our mid traveler and our mid teaser were not replaced at that time. They probably will need to be replaced soon, as those are the only ones that do not have the fire coating on them. But the rest of them were all replaced, I believe, about 6 years ago.
What about the junior high? Because I thought 3 years ago we talked about replacing rigging. Maybe it was the junior high, not the senior high.
Not in my facility. So that might have been the junior high. I do know, if I remember correctly, I believe there was one of the flies at the junior high that was not performing properly and was broken, but I don't want to speak for the junior high since I don't maintain that space.
Barb, that's correct. There was some fly work done at the junior high, and I believe we had the senior high tested at one point.
Yes, we did check that here.
Yeah, we took a look at that. The big expense we had at the senior high was on the lighting system, Leah. That's probably 6 or 7 years ago where we upgraded that.
I believe that was right before I was hired. That Gretchen had that taken. That was taken a look.
I think we spent some major dollars on that. That was failing at the time. So the lighting is in decent shape. Sound is the sound and the communication system. Your internal communication systems are down.
Correct.
And the sound, when you're talking about replacing main speakers in the auditorium, there's got to be. I mean, those are not easy to do. So and you're talking about the wiring. So there's really, there's a couple conduits you're going to be using, and that's about it from what I can hear.
Yes, and right now our wireless system is unable to be used because it's technically illegal to use that wireless system. So that's why we need to rent that out. Our system is so antiquated and old that if you receive a text message while someone is using a wireless microphone, if your text message is on the same frequency as that, the microphone will actually stop working while you are receiving your text message.
While we're talking about the auditoriums, is there anything else that Buildings and Grounds should keep on their radar that would be up and coming to be replaced or fixed?
The only thing that I'm working on right now as auditorium coordinator is getting some quotes. We have some lamps that need to be replaced, as we haven't replaced those in about, I believe, 8 years, but that's not a huge cost. A lamp is just the bulb that goes inside of our different lighting instruments. So those are starting to run out and not work anymore. So we're just looking at some lamps and some gels. So that's not a big thing.
Those have a very limited lifespan, and they're expensive, but they're like toilet paper. They wear out pretty quick.
Yeah, I've actually been able to work on our system so that we are not utilizing the lamps as much to help them last a little bit longer. When I was hired, we switched a few things over so that when students are using them, we're using certain settings when they're just out working in drama class or when the band or choir's out there. And then we're using separate settings when it's a performance. This way our lamps are lasting longer.
Yeah, those bulbs, they have 500 hours, I think, is about all they're rated for.
Yeah, and some we're able to get to, we're looking at moving towards LED for some of the areas. We can't do that for all of theatrical lighting, but just to help with the cost and help them last longer.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, any other comments? I guess I'll try to summarize this. I think we all would love to do this. I think there was some concern with going from the $10,000 to the $40,000. So I guess we're asking to see if there is anything that can be done to, you know, try to help with that. And let's say go ahead and, sounds like go ahead and get the additional quotes and then bring it back to the next meeting.
Terry,
Yes.
I want to encourage Leah to ask for what she actually needs, not to ask for a half a sandwich. Ask for the whole thing. Let us, so we can deal with the whole problem and get it finished, as opposed to coming back every 2 years and buying another bulb. Okay.
Yeah. Jason,
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up real quick. When we did this before, we got quotes. It was really just to replace the microphone. So I think what we saw originally for the 10,000 back then was really just to try to get our wireless system legal. I don't think any of these other needs were taken into consideration then. So that's maybe why you're seeing such a big difference from then and now.
Jason, that's correct. When we started this conversation 100 years ago, it was just the wireless voice mics on the stage. But these other problems have been present the whole time.
yeah. Okay, well, thanks. And then before we go to the non-agenda items, I just wanted to confirm with number one, do we want Jared and Greg to get 3 quotes for this tree work, or are we comfortable with just the one because of the low value of it? Tom?
I think it's insane to make these guys get multiple quotes for things this inexpensive. As a matter of policy, I think we can trust Greg to do what's right. This is not a you know, the numbers are just too small to really worry about it too much.
Barb?
I think we should get 3 just because we always say that, and I don't want to be a hypocrite and say, oh, just not for this one, when we say for everything else 3 quotes.
We say for everything else over a certain number. This is, I mean, good grief.
I don't quite think that's true, but I know I'll hear Tamara. She'll be did you get 3 quotes? So, but, you know, that's just my thoughts.
And I know that we talk about 3 quotes with whenever we have to contract go out to bid. This is, and what's that threshold, Jared? What's the dollar value to where you have to bid stuff out?
The dollar value for bidding is over $50,000. Quotes are 11 to the 50,000.
Jared, to be clear, then, if it's over $11,000, we have to have 3 quotes.
Yes, if it's over 11, we have to get 3 quotes. The bid, I can double check. I need to double check on the bidding. It may not be that high, but
Yeah.
it
used to be 20,000, 25,000, that range. When do we have a policy in place that everything is 3 quotes, or do we have a policy in place that everything over 11,000 is at 3 quotes?
That is the board's policy. Yes.
11,000. Okay, I just want to make that clear that the board policy is $11,000. I just
also the state requirement as well.
Yeah, I understand, and so we're in line with the state. I'm concerned that we run Greg ragged getting 3 quotes on fan belts.
Cinda?
Yeah. Let's work on that. First of all, 3 quotes on fan belts. I know where the cheapest fan belts are in town, and so there wouldn't need to be 3 quotes. thinking about the general economy in town, and when I have my usual tree guy. I have a guy that I usually get to cut down my trees, but I've started trying to give some business to other people with my rental properties. And so I have been looking for more quotes and more quotes on roofing and more quotes in general. And yes, they're all below 11,000. But if we have competition in the area and we've got people competing for our business, I think that we could probably stand to help them out and save the district a little bit of money. And yes, in a $54 million budget, you know, it's not that big of a deal. But it's the idea that it's the community, and sometimes you'll ask a contractor, oh, do you ever do anything for the school district? No, they never call me. I can tell you one business exactly in town that no, they never call me because it's probably under 2,500, and we're just, you know, stuck in our, we'll do it this way because they've always done it. I think we should not rule out just looking, just checking. I don't think it runs anybody that ragged. It's not like you have to get formal estimates and formal quotes like you do for a roof or another big job. So that's just my opinion.
Doug, do you still have your hand up? I'm guessing it was left up.
No, thank you, Mr. Curry. It was just a follow-up to a question that Mr. Harley had, and I didn't want to jump in the middle of the other piece. I can wait.
Okay. This is a tough one for me because I agree with Tom that, you know, for this value, that value, I was expecting to be a larger dollar amount to cut those white pines down. But I can also see where we're to do our due diligence and, you know, get to 3 quotes. So I guess that's where we're landing. Doug, go ahead.
Mr. Harley, you had asked if there was anything else, and this covers, you know, all of our needs. One of the things that was recommended to us throughout the process of looking to see, you know, what it would take to upgrade our system was the idea of opening up our booth. The small windows that we have in the front of our booth at this moment make it difficult to see into the auditorium and get a feel for what the house is seeing and feeling during that process. It was recommended to us to look into try to get that opened up, although we did not include that here. Just knowing what we kind of already had into it, we knew that it would be expensive and it would be a big ask. But I just wanted to let you know that that was something else that was discussed along the way.
Doug, when you say open up, you mean just remove the windows or a window?
It would be that, but it would also be making that opening bigger. So that when you're up in the booth, you know, you have a more general landscape feel for the landscape in front of you. And Miss Lyons, I can let you speak to that as well. But it would be making those windows, because the windows are pretty narrow as they are. It would be taking those, cutting them out, and making that area bigger in general.
So that's also mainly for the sound. Right now, when you are inside of the booth, how the windows are created, they are created for a movie theater to be able to put a projector through. So when we are trying to light something, but more specifically for the sound, what you hear in the booth is not what is out in the house. So very often you have to have a third person up there that is sticking their head out of the window like a cuckoo clock bird, because what you cannot hear inside of the booth. So that means that Mr. O'Lear and I, we can't very easily train and teach our students how to balance sound. What you hear in the booth is not what you hear out in the auditorium. So that makes it very difficult to balance your sound, regulate your sound, change your EQs, things of that nature.
This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm looking for.
Okay.
So if you can wrestle Greg into getting a budget price on that, this is part of the education. This is for these performing arts and technical theater people. So for God's sake, you know, I mean, it can't be $2,500. we're going to cut a big hole and put a frame around it. So talk to Greg, get a number on it, and anything else so that we don't talk about this theater again. Okay, we take a vote on it, we move forward, and by the fall of 2021, you have the stuff that you need to run a first-class program.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug.
No, we thank all of you for your consideration. We know this is a big ask, but we do think it's in the best interest of our kids, and that's the lens we've tried to frame it around, and we do think it'll be exactly that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to non-agenda items. And Barb, to answer your question, those quotes that Jared stated does not include the stump removal. Mr. Jared, are you going to start number one, and then Mr. Town?
Yeah, absolutely. Constellation Energy is here tonight. Mr. Town is here to do a presentation to the committee. They have completed their investment grade audit, looking at all of the district's facilities for possible upgrades to the buildings that could fall under an ESCO project. The report was sent out to the entire board last week for your review. And Mr. Town is here tonight just to kind of, through transparency to the public, present their findings and to have a one-on-one conversation with the committee and the board as to how you would like to move forward with that. So I will hand it over to Mr. Town. I believe he has a short slideshow that he would or presentation to do. So if he could take over and present his screen, he will go through that for the board this evening.
Thank you and good evening. Appreciate you guys having me here again. I'm going to try and click on the Present Now button, and please let me know when things show up.
We're good here.
Okay. I'm going to blow that up a little bit, and I'm not going to be able to see you, so if someone can give me cues as we're going through, if there's some questions, I greatly appreciate it. But hey, again, thanks for having us. Nice to be attending a board meeting after daylight savings time with sunshine outside. So welcome to spring, everybody. I know I had someone looking at my trees last week to get some taken out as well. So always a challenge. With me tonight, I've got Brendan McMasters on the line. I saw him as dialed in, as well as Mike Fenda, one of my engineers, and Adam Campbell, who's attended some meetings in the past with us, who handles your contract from a savings standpoint. So they're here to support me and to answer questions that you have this evening. As Jared said, I pulled together some brief slides to kind of walk you through the report that was provided to you, try and add some context around some of the recommendations, and make sure that we can answer questions that you have. And if we can't this evening, we'll absolutely circle back, as always, as prompt as we can to make sure it's clear at the board level. Little history, if you didn't get a chance to read through the report. Wanted to summarize that we've done over $14 million of these types of improvements through the GIZA legislation here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that's touched a lot of what we're talking about tonight for other buildings throughout the district, from heating, ventilation, air conditioning, roofs, lighting, building envelope, as well as utility services. And I think the first presentation I shared with you at the bottom, our performance against our guarantee of savings, because we guarantee savings to the district every year, but if they're not met, we have to make you whole as an energy services company. And happy to see that we're on track. And that's, I'll say also a big thank you to your facilities department. I'm sorry, Greg's not on, for the efforts that he expends to try and save you dollars, and working with Adam, and Adam doing what he does for us, for you. Little history on Constellation Phase 2 development. I'll call this Phase 2. We talked with the administration and reviewed what was prepared for your October 2020 deferred maintenance priorities list. And you've got a lot of work to do there. You've mentioned that in a number of meetings I've attended. So we talked about that, talked about what may be a good fit for an ESCO. And we also tried to remain cognizant of the fact of the capital dollars that you're looking to allocate for these improvements, and that you have some items such as maybe potentially the AstroTurf or potentially the Eisenhower Secure Vestibule entryway, that we were cognizant of what we paid attention to and tried to hit on the priorities with you. After meeting with administration, I know Jared, myself, our contract specialist and your solicitor talked about the legislation, how it changed. I covered that in the meeting with you folks, and everybody feels it's perfectly proper to extend our contract from that 15 years, which is what it was back in 2011-12, out to 20 years, as the legislation allows us to do now. And in thinking about that and discussing it with you, we talked about the financial value of extending phase one out to 20 years, which I'll share with you later, as well as listen to your input on what we developed for presentation development in that document and for this evening. I'm going to dive right into scope because you want to see where the opportunities are and how we can help you. We spoke about the district lighting. I know that there was dialogue about the lighting work that was done before, and we're coming up on roughly, I'll say about year 8 or 9 if you count the installation on the length of time that the light bulbs have been in for the most part. We're making the recommendation now with the move to technology, as was referenced earlier in the auditorium discussion, to LED technology. Some of the benefits of that LED, classrooms at about 2,000 hours, you're going to get about 25 years of life out of these. So it's going to serve you well. Again, that's 25 years of life expectancy on the lamps that are recommended for installation. Reduction in wattage, just as when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or somewhere and buy an LED bulb, you see that they don't consume very much. What's important here is we're going to free up capacity in the buildings. It was painfully clear to us that the elementaries are stressed out. You've maxed out what you can do electrically in those buildings. And we're going to free up a lot of capacity to solve some comfort issues that I'll explain on the next slide. Exterior wise, we were asked to pay attention in particular, beyond all exterior lights, the high school parking lot lighting to increase its illumination. And also in dialogue, we noted that the track is utilized by the community very extensively, just about every evening, if not every evening. So we're picking select lights there to increase illumination in the parking lot, as well as provide for more cost-effective illumination of the track for walkers at nighttime and so forth. So from a lighting standpoint, we have recommendations across the board for the district that were detailed in the report that was provided to you. We talked about freeing up electrical capacity in the buildings. From talking with Jared and with Greg, you guys are currently in the process or have been in the process of installing the spot coolers that you see at the top right of that slide, typically 2 per classroom, when you have either a teacher or a student who has a medical condition or a requirement for that to be provided, which you do. The circuit breakers that you have in the buildings, I kind of put a graphic up there on the left side that shows how they're maxed out. All the breakers are full. And in the picture on the left, if you can't see it, 3 different rooms, looks like 12, 15, and 16 have had air conditioning added to them or circuits for it. What we're recommending as part of the lighting project is consolidating some of those lighting circuits because we're dropping so much wattage, freeing up capacity within the buildings, and then running 2 duplex outlets to each classroom as called out within the proposal. So you have the opportunity to provide some more flexibility as it relates to providing those services in the elementary buildings. High school and junior high school, air conditioned, if I recall already, but this is how you've chosen to proceed forward in the elementary classrooms. So that would be turnkey and done. And the limitations were called out, I think, in the proposal that not 2 rooms side by side could operate, but they would be wired so that you'd have a little more flexibility in how you'd accomplish that within those buildings. Horace Mann Elementary School, we've read through the number of engineering reports that you've done, as well as done our due diligence at Horace Mann. You need to replace the old electrical systems in that facility, primarily switchgear, older panel boards and feeders, some of them cloth wrapped. We understand that there may be in the future the desire to add an elevator to that building to lend itself to being, I guess, more ADA compliant, easier to utilize for students, staff, and so forth. So we've included the increase of the size of the switchgear as well as a new breaker for that for future use. And it's just old. It needs done. A lot like the gear that you have there in the auditorium you spoke about earlier. I'm sure this has been talked about for a while, but we're recommending its replacement this time as well, and have included that for your review. Additionally, district-wide, we said, hey, we didn't take a look at plug load control back in 2012, but technology wasn't really, I'll say, up to par for that, but it is now. So we're recommending installing some plug load controllers throughout the building. I know Michael developed a pretty detailed listing of the types of things that we could control within your buildings. And they'd be connected up through the Wi-Fi that you have and would be managed through a software package. My apologies, in the proposal it says 3-year software support. It's actually for all 20 years. I missed that during my final edit, so the software support is included throughout the term. And one of the items on the top, or the bottom right, if you will, are the projectors that you have within the classrooms. I think Michael may have been having a conversation with Randy, and I think Randy's on the line today as well in the IT department, that y'all go through a lot of expensive light bulbs in those projectors. With this technology, we'd be able to, or you'd be able to actually to schedule when they can be operated, not be operated. And in the example of a charging cart, I think there are a couple charging carts that we identified. You could also set thresholds for the amount of wattage that they consume and control the use of the connected items better. There's obviously an override for these if somebody had to use something after hours, but we saw this as an opportunity that you could deploy across the district for some additional savings. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning improvements. I apologize, I should have typed that out. HVAC. We've had comments at the board meeting in the past, so I'll be on point and we'll obviously answer any questions that you have. We're making recommendation that the larger central administration as well as school administration systems be replaced based on end of useful life. It's also been noted that the systems in the administration wing, central administration wing, with what were called, I guess, smart diffusers, if I got that right. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg's not here. But you have some issues. So we're going to be doing pretty decent, I'll say almost end-to-end replacements there on the HVAC equipment, including the taller curbs we talked about for clearance that needs to be done. DDC, or direct digital controls, would be included on those units. That's basically the temperature controls that controls it. We're making the recommendation that bipolar ionization be included for each of the units. And as with the previous phase, an eye on energy, so we've included heat recovery, variable speed drives, and so forth. And this would all be integrated back to your current building automation system, or as some would affectionately call it, energy management system that utilized district-wide. So now that could all be seen and managed by the facility staff centrally as well as remotely. So I think that covers what we've spoken about before on the needs for the HVAC at East Pike. East Pike School, again, school, not administration. You have heating, ventilation, air conditioning controls provided by the Barber Coleman Company. And that dates back to the origination or original reconstruction, if you will, of the building. And the systems are not widely supportable anymore. So we're making the recommendation that that Network 8000 system, typically I think a 15 to 17 year shelf life, but Barber Coleman has been absorbed a couple of times since that system went in. I think first by CB, then changed to Invencis, and then I think to Schneider ultimately bought them. They've kind of gone through the mill. But we're making a recommendation that a Johnson control system compatible with what you have district-wide that we installed in phase 1 and that you recently implemented in the new office select section there at East Pike be installed. The eye on this was to be, I'll say, as complete as possible for you and make sure that we did our due diligence and included I don't want to say everything, but a very, very large portion of the controls in that building to be replaced. And with the goal towards eliminating the old pneumatic controls or temperature controls that are basically operated on air that's run through the building through pneumatic or tubing lines that changes pressures to make dampers open, valves open and close. And they're just not as, I don't know, maybe reliable is not the right word, not as precise as direct digital controls. So we're making the recommendation that they be changed out as well as part of this project. And that includes some valves and select equipment as identified in the proposal. In the junior high, a couple of, I'll say, tag-on items that make sense to do would be adding of CO2 control to control ventilation. Post-COVID, CO2 control will be utilized to minimize the amount of outside air, to save you energy in heating and cooling mode, depending upon the air handling units. As we're in COVID mode, I see that CO2 being utilized now to set alarms for high levels of CO2 that say there are a lot of people in the space and that we probably need to increase ventilation. And that could be worked with on a programming standpoint. So there's a benefit during and post-COVID that we make a recommendation to you for this evening. The screen down at the bottom is an actual photograph of your building automation system that the guys use and gals to control the buildings. Gives them everything from how the boilers are operating, alarms, temperatures. They can change it, set schedules. Pretty slick stuff. Picture your probably fanciest home programmable thermostat through a smartphone times 1,000, if you will. It does a lot of neat things for you there. And on roof replacement, I know we spent a lot of time in some of the meetings. Nothing has changed from our last dialogue. We're looking at the Carlisle 25-year roof. We discussed, I think, in detail the ballasted main field, lower right, and the mechanically fastened insulation and adhered section over the gym, which has been drawn out. We added the 3 inches of insulation that matched up to pursue what you'd been looking at prior to our engagement. You're currently not to code. We covered that in the last meeting, and we also gave an option for additional insulation to hit some R values that were talked about in the last meeting. And the picture of the rooftop mechanical unit on the left of the slide shows you some of the elevations of one of the units there, just for reference to what we spoke about in the last meeting. And in your package, I've kind of tried to break it down into 3 components or sections, and you've got some details in what was provided to you in the report for each item. But for everything we just discussed, we're looking at just over $4.9 million of improvements from the electrical, HVAC, and roof. And then the question became, as we talked about, what does that start to look like financially? I mean, we know what we have in capital dollars. How does that phase 1 and 2 going to help us here? So what I put together on this slide is really just the first half of the one page in your document that you received on expanded saving streams. And next to each year, I've got phase 1 project remaining years, which is really 8 through 15, plus the extra 5 out to 20. And we talked about increasing the savings since we're outperforming. We're willing and are going to guarantee additional savings on phase 1 through the term of the first project out through the 20 years if you extend it through this phase 2. Additionally, what I wanted to represent on phase 1 is after that initial 15-year time frame, the guarantee on savings, less the measurement and verification that you pay us to do every year, that we're willing to guarantee that out moving forward as well. So those can be considered as some revenue streams, project savings continuing, however you'd like to interpret those. But that's some of the value of extending on phase 1 is essentially an extension of a guarantee of over $2.5 million to the school district and taxpayers. When we roll in, a lot like phase 1, a capital intensive project with energy savings under phase 2, I put them together. And I drew that gold line down the center to kind of demark on the left what we just covered. And then on the right, phase 2. So what you'll see is we're going to be generating roughly about $100,000 to start out of the gate in savings. We are going to charge a fee to do the ongoing measurement and verification of those savings to demonstrate that every year, which is minor, in my opinion. And then we have some rebates and incentives associated with the work that we're proposing, primarily on the lighting systems. I think actually all of the lighting systems for reduction in your demand and fixed reduction charges out over 3 years. That's roughly $32,000. And we've just run the math. So if we run that math over to the right for phase 2, in addition to the phase 1 at the bottom, you can see some of the power of, I'll say, the phase 2 and phase 1 combined. I think it really does help and support good decisions as well as decisions with a focus on energy savings for you long term. That's energy and operational costs. And I included construction period savings at the top. And the years, I tried to match those up. I think our audits are due May of every year. I think I looked at the end of your fiscal year. So we have construction basically for 21, 22 and tried to capture some of that for you. Benefits, I think I covered pretty well the last meeting. Single source accountability for everything you can see there, soup to nuts, down to training, commissioning, and making sure it gets done right. Financial risk mitigation, no change orders for the scope of work proposed, guarantees, phase 1 and 2, increased and extended. Improved work learning environment. We're going to make it more comfortable, especially in the areas where we're adding the new temperature controls and the new systems for sure. And as we talked about, buildings are aging. These are community assets. The community's made investment in these structures to serve your population. This helps protect those assets, and it also helps, I think, increase the value of those assets long term. A lot of equipment and items are end of useful life. They just need replaced, a lot like we talked about at the auditorium today. And I guess that's my brag point. Phase 1 was very successful and continues to be a success. We can execute as promised, and we expect nothing less from phase 2 for you guys here. This slide hasn't changed from the first time I met with you. I want to say it was maybe November, early November, I think. Maybe it was late October. We're at point 4. We've developed the investment grade audit and presented the findings to the Board of Education for your consideration. We'd love to entertain some dialogue. We'll fine tune as you see fit. We're ready to proceed based on what your wishes are and get working for you and making the buildings better and saving you some more money. That's where we're at, and we'd love to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And I guess before I say anything, Barb, do you have any questions, comments?
I have two about the electrical. Can you explain more what a plug load control is? I've never heard of that.
Sure thing. And let me see if I can escape out of this. I can bring it back up if we need to go back to anything here. Is there a stop sharing button? Let's see. I'll stop presenting. I can go back. Plug load controller is basically a module that plugs into an electrical outlet where you'd plug, let's say, those projectors in, or maybe a copier or a coffee pot or something. And it can be managed through software that's going to allow you to turn it on and off based on a schedule. The one slide there, you could also control, I believe, the charging and the wattage that it consumes for a computer cart. So they'd all be deployed across the district for the items we identified in the proposal, and they'd be controlled centrally, basically on a time schedule, and can be adjusted just like you do with occupied and unoccupied for heating and cooling.
And my second question is, do the electrical upgrades include new wiring, or is it going off existing wiring?
For the new plugs in the classrooms, we'll be running new wiring to the classrooms with new outlets to accommodate the spot coolers that you're utilizing. In Horace Mann, for the older breaker panels, you have a couple different sections in there, construction-wise. We're going to be pulling new wiring to install new panels from that new switchgear. that's located down in the basement. So when it comes in the building, you got new gear, you got new wiring going out to those older breaker panels for that component of it. And then from there, where you'd have wiring going to the classrooms for the 2 outlets, that'd be new wiring as well. So very, very complete, Barbara.
Brian, to be clear, and using Horace Mann as an example, you're only running the 2 circuits to the classroom there. The other circuits you just repower. You're not rewiring the entire building.
I'll defer to Michael to address your question on that, since he's the one that spent all the time on it. Michael, please.
Hi, everybody. Not sure if you can see me yet. I'm Mike Fend with Constellation. Tom, can you ask that again? Make sure I'm getting it right.
I want Barb to understand that the proposal doesn't include pulling all the wiring out of the building and putting new wiring in. You're only wiring, in Horace Mann as an example, 2 outlets into the classrooms. The other wiring that is to the switches and to the existing outlets is going to stay the same.
Yes. So with regard to replacing the panel boards,
you're going to replace the panel boards, and you're going to replace the feeders to the panel boards, but you're not going to replace the wire from the outlet to that panel board.
That is correct.
Existing outlet or an existing switch.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
existing.
Yes. So it's going to be a combination, Barb. They're going to basically replace the wiring that needs to be replaced. There's nothing wrong with a 12 gauge wire that hasn't been chopped up. So those would remain.
Anything else, Barb?
So when I was up in Franklin, I know that some of the teachers said they don't have enough outlets for other electrical devices. So once they have an air conditioning unit, are they still going to be limited on the electrical power to use other types of, I'm trying to think of an example, like other types of electrical things they need, or is it still going to be pretty maxed out on what teachers can plug in and not plug in?
Yeah, what we're changing would not affect the existing outlets in the classrooms.
If I can add to that, if there was no requirement for air conditioning, let's say in a couple of classrooms side by side, there'd be some additional power outlets there that they could utilize. The intent is to have them there so when you do have a case where you have to have air conditioning for a child or a teacher based on medical, but it's there, it's ready to go and can be utilized. So, but that's being accomplished by dropping out that roughly about 2/3 of the electrical load out of the buildings off the lighting, which is affording us the opportunity to provide that to you. But that's a great question. So
you're basically going to be providing 2 more outlets in these classrooms that are outlet challenged at this point. And those outlets, you can plug anything into those outlets that need to be plugged into them.
You could plug anything you want to into those outlets. That is true.
Yeah, those are going to be dedicated 20 amp circuits.
Yes, each outlet would have a dedicated 20 amp circuit, though, as Brian alluded to before, because there are still capacity issues within the building overall. Adjacent rooms would basically share breakers. So you could, nominally in adjacent rooms, you could plug in 2 portable AC units in one or the other. And that layout could be adjusted depending on certain needs in certain areas of the building.
Okay. Going back to Horace Mann, are you upgrading the service to a 3-phase service? Is that part of this?
No. I don't think that was something that we were proposing to do. I think it was nominally replacement in kind, except increased capacity.
If we do an elevator there, we're going to need a 3-phase power. Would you take a look at that and see if I believe the 3-phase is on the pole? Would you take a look at that to see if that how much more that would add to the project?
Yep, we will take a look at that.
Okay.
Tom, to piggyback on that, would an elevator Ben Franklin or whatever to fix the handicap accessibility there, is that going to change a power distribution?
I believe Ben Franklin has three-phase. Can you confirm that, Michael? Ben Franklin?
Off the top of my head, no, I can't confirm that, Tom. I'm sorry.
Barb, I believe it does have three-phase. And I'm just remembering that the transformer that's on those poles. So the transformers that are on that pole. But Barb's right too. If we're that building also should have three-phase to it when we get done with this. So if you take a look at that, Michael, and confirm.
Will do.
Barb, anything else?
I'm sure there is, but right now I'm just trying to digest it all. So at this very moment, no. But thank you.
Brian,
Thank you. Good question.
The HVAC at the administration building, it has 100 foot of ductwork that's outside on top of the roof. I would certainly like to see all of that to be inside and under the insulation blanket. If that's possible. I suspect it's Jim that your proposal doesn't include that.
That's correct. You know, we talked at the last meeting, Tom, that the unit over in the classroom administration area, school, is all inside because it's basically coming out of the bottom, returning to the bottom. Based on configuration, and Mike can speak to a little more. You don't have the space to go ahead and do that on the central administration side. But I appreciate your point.
No, I mean, even if you, there's got to be a way to do it. Even if we went to smaller machines and smaller ductwork, right now the system is the system is woefully inadequate for comfort and efficiencies. And I would delete it if we're not going to improve that system. When you're in the boardroom, we've never been comfortable. We're either too hot or too cold. There has to be, and again, it's because you're trying to get one machine to do too many things. So breaking it up into smaller machines, making your ductwork smaller, would make a lot of sense. So I would certainly, I would vote to eliminate it if we're not going to redo it correctly. Okay. Go ahead, Cinda.
Tom, my question is for you. I was always told that the boardroom and the administration offices were uncomfortable because of the kind of controls that were used. They're talking about changing all the controls in East Pike. Would that not take care of that situation?
It's still a major system, Cinda, that has most of its ductwork outside, and it's not responsive.
Well, I agree that it would be nice for it to be inside, but and insulated well and save more that way. But is it or is it not an issue of the controls? Because I heard that the controls weren't as smart as they think they are, and couldn't tell when there were very many people, and didn't cool. And I was always blamed on the controls. And whatever system is there, will the new controls not do that? Will the new controls be accurate?
The new controls will be better, but you're still asking a big machine to do a whole bunch of different things, it's not the way to do it. We shouldn't be running that massive machine when we have 3 people in the boardroom. And one of the problems, I mean, and putting the ductwork, the air through those ducts that are outside. I mean, basically, the ductwork is outside, and it's not the way to do the building. And I forget what the number was, but it's a big number just to flip those things off and not to end up with something that is superb. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, isn't that
Way to insulate? I'm sorry, Carrie.
You could insulate it more, yes. But my question was going to be, in the report, isn't that where you're suggesting that some structural work be done because of the load on the beam?
Yeah, I mean, I apologize. That was a bullet point in my presentation. I recognize now that I mentioned that those units currently are sitting on a structural beam that's, I think, overutilized was the proper term. So we have to correct that as well with it.
So I guess my point,
with what you have as well.
yeah, my point is if there's a cost to that, and then there's a cost to doing what Tom's suggesting, so that would help balance out a revision or an upgrade to what Tom's suggesting. And I think, you know, a lot of us have been thinking about this and wanting to get that system inside if we can.
And I think Mike probably can speak a little bit to the comfort issues since he was involved in the development. Again, the structural needs to be done. It's definitely not a game changer from a cost standpoint, from my recollection. We're just pointing that out to you based on our analysis. But Michael, I see you had your hand up there that you wanted to possibly talk to the comfort issues that are there.
Yeah, to Cinda's question or point, I was going to say that it was our understanding that a lot of the comfort issues were caused by the smart diffuser systems in the district admin offices, where the thermostats were actually located within those smart diffusers, and that they weren't doing a very good job of reacting to the actual space temperatures. Whereas the RTU serving the local admin offices is a more traditional VAV system with VAV boxes, not smart diffusers. And what we were proposing was to replace the RTUs and go back with VAV boxes and a traditional VAV system for all three locations served. Yeah, just want to mention that. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so that should take care of the comfort issues. What Tom's suggesting would make things, let Tom settle down.
Right now, you have two machines on top
I'm
of that.
trying to say something. What Tom is saying would increase efficiency and make things run more efficiently, which would be good. And what Terry is saying and what you're talking about, the structural thing, is that would overall help the building. And so it's not one of what Tom's saying and one of what I'm saying and one of what Terry's saying. It's all three will be beneficial to the district. Now you can talk, Tom.
Okay, Cinda, there's two machines on this building. Serve the first floor and the basement level. And we're asking those two machines to do very different things. You can solve the structural problem by putting the compressor on the ground if we wanted to. Put an air handler in a room downstairs. We could do a split system. There's 35 ways to solve this problem. The one that's up there right now is about the worst system that we could come up with. Now, we can control it better, no question about it. But we're controlling a 1950s Mack truck here, and asking it to do 2021 efficiencies. So
okay, so we're talking about three separate things that when they're taken care of will make everything better. Everything will be more comfortable, be more efficient, and it'll be better for the structure of the building. So that we're agreeing with each other. So
no, we are.
Yeah, even though you're trying to give me a lecture. Yeah.
I would not lecture you, Cinda. My apologies. Okay.
Okay, Tom, you have any other questions, comments?
Well, those were the main ones. I know that by moving this forward, Brian's right. We're going to shed a bunch of electrical load on those lights that will be very beneficial. Give us some freeboard in all the buildings. I know when we did the gymnasium, we were bouncing up against the high school level, and upgrading that service to any way it was unbelievably expensive. So by moving down this path, we're going to buy ourselves some time, save some power, and solve some of our maintenance issues. So I would certainly encourage everybody on this call to move this thing forward as best we can.
Barb, you raised your hand again.
Yes, I found two more questions. Page 14, it says, the electrical charges for all buildings except East Pike include various kWh consumption charges and various kW demand charges. East Pike Elementary is on all electric tariff, which does not include. And it says it's unknown why East Pike is on all electric tariff. Can you explain what that is?
I'll chime in, and Michael, if you want to jump in as well. You can get different rates of billing, maybe one being for all electric heat. I go back to my father-in-law out off of Warren Road out there, heading west out of town. They had an all-electric home, electric tariff. They wouldn't do their laundry until after a certain time of night to kind of eliminate a higher charge. We don't know why that building is on electric tariff rate. We took a look at comparable rates, non-all electric rates. We don't know that raising the specter with your utility company might not be a disadvantage to you at this time, but we're still paying attention to it. It's just a matter as to how you're currently being billed at that facility.
All right, and my second question is, how much of the savings is through the negotiation with the electric rate for a better charge rate versus lowering wattage of our electrical usage? And the thought behind this is, if for some reason the next 20 years the district would go to solar, how would there still be savings just from having the lower wattage being used on the electrical, on like the light bulbs, or is a lot of this through savings through negotiating through those electrical providers?
What we're talking about in our proposal here, Barbara, is a reduction in what you consume. And the cheapest form of energy that you can generate is what you save. So the first thing you would do if you would ever go down the road of looking to add solar to a building is reduce as much of that load as possible to reduce the amount of solar that you would have to add to a building to support it. We're not making a recommendation at this time to the school district to modify the current rate that you're paying for electricity. We currently have your electrical contract and provided savings to the district during phase one. Our contract, I believe, expires and or renews or is renegotiated fall of 2022. We are still in discussions with, again, depending upon where the board goes with the level and scope of work provided, that will show us what your load profile or shape is so that we can best price a renewal option for you. Or, as I think you did with your gas very recently at a board meeting, you worked through the IU and negotiated a gas rate. And I don't know if we're providing that or not for you, Barbara, but we're not proposing that right now. But that is something that will take shape as the months come. And any savings we can generate, obviously, we provide to the school district and work through Jared to make sure that you all know that we can do better for you. If we can. I don't know that yet.
Okay, thanks, Barb. Good questions. Does any other board members want to raise their hand? I don't see any, but a couple things. Go ahead, Julia.
I'm just trying to get a handle from the point of view of audit and finance of, in our committee, what we want to talk about. In other words, what kind of an overall investment this would take if we were to do everything. And over what term?
Well, we approach this as directed, administration and the board, that you have some capital dollars from a refunding that you did. I'm going to say it started out at about 10 million. It's now down to maybe about 7.5, if memory serves. That we wanted to pay attention to some of the key items on the deferred maintenance list, as well as generate some savings. So at this point in time, I'm under the impression that we've been talking about those dollars being utilized to basically pay or fund for the improvements that are made. So if it was this project in totality, it'd be $4.9 million in work. You already have the money, then that frees up additional cash flow on the savings side that you could allocate to it wouldn't just be earmarked for buildings then. You could utilize it for programs, teachers, this, that, because I believe what you've borrowed is earmarked towards facilities and infrastructure based on your bonds. There are additional options out there that you could consider of funding this separately. That would require going through that process to do so if you'd like. And then I'll say, compare that or work that back with PFM as we did with phase one into the saving streams. So you can structure your financing to match up as we did with phase one. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. So you're saying about a $5 million outlay.
Currently, as it sits tonight, we're at 4.9 and change. That's correct.
Okay.
Brian, I'm sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Well, I'm just, so, I mean, I'm not talking about exactly what you propose. I'm just talking about how the overall mechanics of the transaction would work. So what would be our next step?
What I'm looking for is hopefully determination from the Board of Education of the scope of work you'd like to include in the final project. If it's what's proposed tonight, we would obviously sit with Jared as well as your solicitor and my contracts folks and get that addition worked out, which we've talked to them about already, and just proceed that process forward. As this in addition to our existing contract, then you'd have to make a formal motion at the Board of Education that you're accepting that contract for this amount for the scope of work as presented. And you vote, 5 votes carries it. And we present contracts for signature and start construction. And traditional, how you would pay it that way if you're doing dollars that you have on hand. If you're going to do I'll say a tax exempt lease purchase, which some clients have done, that would have to be structured and voted on. Or if you were to go ahead and do something as it relates to your bonds, obviously bond counsel and PFM will probably be involved at that standpoint. But I don't know that that's going to be the case for this right now, if you will.
Could you, just one more thing, you said something in the center of that. You said you could do one, you could do the PFM, and then you said, or you could do something else?
Legislation is very clear. You can use a tax exempt lease purchase or a TELP. Don't know
that was it. Yeah. Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. It's a tax exempt lease purchase. Since we're adding on to phase one, would probably be, I think, an 11 or 12 year, basically lease. No money up front. They'd structure that probably maybe with some even payments or payments in arrears. You'd probably supplement it on the cash flow side with capital that you have, but you'd have a payment stream over time, and you get the money up front basically to pay us and the contractors for work to be done.
Yeah. What in your portfolio? What do most people do?
Every client is different. I have clients that pay cash. I have clients that do bonds. I have clients that do leases. I will refer you to speak with your municipal financial advisor. Otherwise, I think I'm probably breaking a federal regulation because I'm not one. But it's across the board. It depends on where you're sitting and what you're thinking long term.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I think, Jared, we ought to put we need to have sort of an idea of what we want to do through the Audit and Finance Committee. I don't think you would disagree, Terry, but if you do, you could say so. But I'm very interested in this because it solves a lot of problems, obviously.
No,
Absolutely. We can put it on the agenda.
This to go over. Go ahead, Jared. I'm sorry.
We absolutely can put it on the agenda for next Monday to talk about it in finance. Just one thing that I just wanted to make sure while we have Constellation on is, on page 12 of the report that I sent the board, kind of summarizes the cost of the almost $5 million project, but it also breaks it out into kind of smaller projects within that 5 million. And while Brian's on the phone, I just wanted to be clear on the phone on the meeting that the board or has the ability to either take everything as a whole or break it out into those pieces depending on what they would like to do. Is that correct?
But I'll say yes, we approached this as a project. And there are some things that are interrelated. We talked about the lighting to do the electrical for the classrooms. If I can't forget the capacity, I can't do the plug loads for the classrooms. Rooftops need to be raised with insulation in the roof, and that needs to be done. Jared, if you were to say, hey, Brian, can you just do the plug load controllers? That's all we want to do. It's probably not a project for us, but we're going to have a construction manager and complete project management on site allocated across all the final shift of work. We'll determine what that cost is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of those are tied together. There's no doubt about that. If the East Pike roof is as you guys have proposed it, and as the board asked for it, is to move forward, then the HVAC systems probably need to be updated. I just want to make sure for the boards that I don't want to call it a laundry list, but it is a list of items, and the board has some room, some give or take as to exactly what they want. If they don't want to do a $5 million project, if that's not what they're looking for, there's some flexibility in how that can, what they can choose to have done through this project.
You bet, Jerry. Absolutely correct.
What are the rules of flexibility? I mean, in other words, how flexible? I mean, how do you go about grouping them?
Obviously, that's for the board to really determine as to what the highest needs are. I think many of these are on that 1 to 2 to 5 year capital list that you developed.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Brian and Joey. I think, like you said, though, too, some of them are interrelated. So you got to watch what, if we did start choosing parts of this, then, we may have to do certain things and not do certain things.
So I'm not big on chopping it up. I think if we're going to do it, we ought to bite it off. But it didn't even occur to me that we could split it up. I assumed that I assumed that we had to take all.
I'll give you an example. Hey, Brian, we don't want to run the wiring into the classrooms because we aren't sure for the outlets. Okay, it's fine. I'm not going to go rewire the circuit panels for the lighting, but when you get to that point, if you don't have to, you don't have to right now. You get better value out of a larger project because my construction manager can run more dollars at one time. If you understand what I'm saying, that type of a thing as well.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So it's always been that way. A $2 million project costs more than a $5 million project costs to build, just in those types of components in those projects. So, but there was conversation last meeting after the architect. I know he's speaking again tonight, that at Eisenhower there may be a classroom that's affected, and maybe those rooms up that one side. We could absolutely back that out if you haven't made your mind up on those. I'd still recommend doing the lights in the remainder of the building that isn't going to be touched, since we're doing exterior as well. We can leave that off to the side for a future date. We're here to work with you on that. I want you to understand that, and we want it to be a successful project.
Anything else, Julia, or you're good?
I'm good. I'm just trying to grasp it. It's a lot of how the pieces work together, and just all the different terms. I'm starting to get a better idea, though, of how the puzzle gets put together. So,
yeah, and I agree with you. I think for sure we'll talk about it at your committee, the Audit and Finance Committee, and that'll give us another opportunity to come up with some questions and stuff in between now and then. So, Barb, you raised your hand again, and I think Tom. Then I have some comments also.
Okay, I have 2 questions. You mentioned about the AC will be every other room. Is there a way to do it where it's every other room on the opposite side of the hallway? As given in with Ben Franklin, east versus west, the one side really heats up versus the other side more would heat up morning versus the afternoon because of the sun directly on the one side of the building. I don't know wiring if it has to be they have to be right beside each other, or if you could do the every other room is across the hallway instead.
I don't know, Michael, if you want to chime in on that.
Sure.
I think the idea was to ensure that the capability was in each classroom, depending upon what students and or teacher may have a medical item that would need to be addressed with air conditioning in that location. Is there anything else, Mike, you want to add to that?
I think the answer to your question, Barbara, is yes. We can break it up. I think the limitation is that you're going to be limited to 50% of classrooms. And if you guys tell us, like I kind of mentioned earlier, that this area over here has a higher concentration or likelihood of needing AC units at the same time, we can pair the outlets in one of those rooms with something somewhere else close by-ish that has less of a chance for the need. So yes.
That's really great to hear, because I have a feeling in the future many more students and teachers will conveniently need to cool down the rooms. So that's really great to hear. My second comment is more kind of for the committee or board. We're talking about electrical wiring. I'd really like to see in, I'm not sure the age of the wiring at Eisenhower, but Ben Franklin and Horace Mann, all of the electrical wiring, especially the cloth wiring, being updated. So I don't know, should we have a board conversation about where we're going to go with our buildings in the future, like just a discussion item at the end of the agenda, so the whole board chimes in of just what are we looking at, because as a buildings and grounds committee, we're saying, oh, we want to do this project. As finance, you have money, but where is the board in general sitting to know, okay, what's the exact future of projects in whole? If we're working at replacing some electrical, maybe we should replace all of the electrical. So Terry, that's kind of, it's you're the chair. Like, would you want to do a board discussion, just as a discussion item, not as a motion, so the whole board chimes in as kind of where the future of these projects are going, and that would tie in also with the Eisenhower project, and just so that we're not working in pieces, we're working as a whole.
Yeah, it's a good question, Barb, but I think you said a lot there, and I'm trying to sift out what the question is. But if you're asking, should we rewire buildings in completely? I thought that's what I heard.
Well, so at Ben Franklin, I believe it's mostly cloth wiring. It'd be nice for all of that wiring to be updated. And then Horace Mann, and I don't recall what Eisenhower is off the top of my head. If it's somebody else might know if it's newer wiring or not. It's not new wiring, but I feel like if we're going to touch electrical, we should do the electrical in all the elementary buildings that need upgraded, and just not piece out some circuits. And maybe we need to have a board discussion on that, just so we can, as we make a decision on which pieces or this whole project goes forward, that we're working as a whole, not in parts.
Yeah, and I have no problem at any time having a board discussion, but I guess I'll give you my opinion at this time is I don't think all the wiring needs replaced in any of the buildings. I think this project, if money was unlimited, you could do some once, but I don't think that that's a need. I think what this project takes care of is some of our needs. So, Tom, you have your hand raised?
I do. This is the time for the board to have the discussion. This is a committee that deals with the buildings and grounds. It's up to us to bring a motion to the board. If they want to discuss it during a motion, then I think that's the appropriate time. This is the time to have the discussion. Secondly, you cannot replace wiring in a building without replacing the finishes. So, and I'll use an example at East Pike. The ceiling lights are wired from conduit that's above the roof in a trough. To pull that wire, the demolition is going to be unbelievable. So you unless if you don't do what Barb suggests, unless you're gutting the building, it's virtually impossible to do that without replacing finishes. So the cost of having that discussion, add another zero to this $5 million. It's unbelievably difficult. Just pulling 2 circuits in every classroom is going to be hard enough, but to replace a switch and a light and a wire to a light that's in the ceiling, you're tearing everything out and repaint and replastering and repainting. So
Right. Okay, we got it. Let's go move on here, Tom. We got it.
Hold on. One more thing. Okay. On the page 12 of the report, the electrical improvements are saving us almost 70,000, and the roof replacements about 13,000. The HVAC improvements are 7,000. That's something to pay attention to. But there isn't anything on this list that isn't on our list to replace, Terry. So this is a way to get this work done, get it partially paid for by the energy savings. There isn't anything here that is showing up that we didn't expect.
Right.
I would, Brian, ask you one more question. Are there any other pneumatic controls in any of the buildings? Only at East Pike, or do we have pneumatics in other places?
I'm going to ask Brendan and Michael. They're the ones that walked all the buildings soup to nuts.
Okay.
Tom, I'm not really aware. We did some major upgrades in phase 1, which I wasn't personally part of. And so we were really only looking at East Pike for the controls upgrades. Brendan, I don't know if you have a recollection on that.
My reason for asking this question is the pneumatics are a 1960 system. They're difficult to maintain. As soon as something develops a leak somewhere, the things go haywire. They're difficult to control. If there are other systems, Michael, that are pneumatic, we should look at getting those replaced as part of this project. Okay, and I don't know the answer to that.
We can look back and see if there are or there are not. Get back to you on that.
It doesn't do us any good to put a 21st century controlling system on top of a pneumatic system. So I'd like to see those disappear if we do have any of those around.
And
sure. Well,
I think Jared, you said that Greg's out today. Is he back in tomorrow? Just curious.
He's off all week.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll circle back. We've got 2 engineering reports that you guys have paid for from 15 and 19, I think, if I recall. We'll go back through our notes as well on that. Yeah, I think it was mentioned. I think Julia mentioned it in one of the meetings. You all get a list of a lot of things that you need to do, and you all know you need to do them. This is just a slice of that needs to be done. I think we tried to stay focused on some of the pressing needs and brought some of the things to light with respect to, I'll say, the 2 circuits in the classrooms for the air conditioning. And I think everything else was pretty much on your list, or at least talked about in some way, shape, or form as being required. And talked about the time for construction is coming. That's summertime. We're looking to get some resolution on what you'd like to proceed forward with. I think Jared had asked me a question about some of the single pane windows. And I talked about the windows over at Eisenhower, that we started to look at those and we backed off because you've got an architect coming in. It'd be a waste of our time to do that. Why burden this project with those hours at that time? I think conversation probably will continue beyond summer 2021 and what's developed out of this project into maybe some deeper needs as the committee and the board talk more broadly and long term. And it's a lot of that's in our wheelhouse of what we do. So.
All right. Cheney, I think you raised your hand.
Yes, sir. Just to answer the question about the pneumatics, both the 2nd and 3rd floor of Horace Mann are still pneumatic, so we still have that part of the system there.
Okay, thank you.
Cheney, is that the only place left?
There are some smaller units on the ground floor, but all of the major air handlers and unit vents on the ground floor have been changed, and that is now part of the Johnson system. So mainly it's the second and third floor.
Okay, but that's the only building that has that in East Pike. Then the other buildings are good.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, Brian. So it's only Horace Mann. So if we could take a look at adding that in too.
You bet. More than happy to run that down.
Thank you, sir.
Jared, at our next Audit and Finance Committee meeting, could we please have sort of it's not much time, but could you kind of work up a matrix where we could sort of see what the advantage of and disadvantage of the lease system versus the bond system would be? I'm assuming that you're thinking that too, just we'd have to look at the bond element of it.
Yeah, I can reach out to our financial advisors and see if they can put some of that information together. Because I'm not sure the third option that Brian mentioned. I have not heard of that.
Which one, the lease?
The lease option, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was intriguing, but maybe there's somebody that can explain. I mean, it probably off the top of my head, there's more disadvantages than advantages, but I guess it depends on how the payment streams work ultimately.
And I remember it's Dodd-Frank legislation. That's why you got financial advisors.
Right. Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to ask some questions because I'm having some computer battery problems here. So I wanted to ask about the projectors. Is there anything to do with those other than replace them? I'm guessing you can't put new LED bulbs in those. And then is there anything different to do with that plug load?
I defer to Randy on the projectors. He's the one that's buying the bulbs. I think Michael talked to him one day about it. But they're pretty expensive, and you get you have quite a lot of replacements for it. And there's some other items as well that we're.
Yeah, there really aren't any other kind of bulbs that can fit in that. So, and the projection unit itself, once they get old enough, the lumens on them are pretty rough. So we're replacing them with anything between 2,500 lumens or more with the newer ones. But yeah, they're really, the bulb technology for those really, I mean, it is what it is. We'll end up replacing the actual projection unit to upgrade from there. But being able to turn them off will help us immensely, because I mean, no matter how much you kind of ask, a lot of times they get left on in the evening or even sometimes over the weekend. So being able to turn them off will help us out a lot.
Randy, as I understand, these plugs are individually addressable, so you can tune each plug to turn off and on when you need it to be.
Yeah, that's what they're telling us. Yes, they'll connect to our Wi-Fi, and we'll be able to centrally control them through a monitoring system. Or I'm not sure if it's cloud-based or if we have to have an on-premise, server for that. But yeah, we should be able to do that.
You can do it on Greg's phone. With these,
I'm going to talk some here because my battery's going dead. So,
okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask about doing all of this or part of it, and we'll have further discussion between now and the audit and finance. I do want it part of the audit and finance committee agenda next time, if that's okay. Is there any of the COVID relief money that could be used for any of this?
There's certainly ways that we can whether it's use that directly, the COVID relief money directly, or whether that would be using that money to pay for some things out of the general fund that we could then use general fund money to pay for this. But there are ways that we can use possibly some of our new COVID relief money to pay for this project.
Well, that would be good to know how much it's for the next audit and finance committee.
That would be up to how much,
if that's possible.
Yeah, it's gonna be part of the budget discussion. don't know that by Monday we will have an exact figure, and that a lot of that is up to the comfort level of the board as well.
And then the insulation depth that you had, you sort of make a reference to that we're still not up to code even with what's being proposed?
No, you're currently not at code. The 3 inches, which is in parallel to what was being explored, is there. And there was some reference to, let's say, R42, 43, and you'll need an extra inch to get there based on the core samples that we reviewed. We included that in the write-up as to what that additional charge would be if you wanted to those levels.
Yeah, we'll need to know what that additional cost is.
Yeah, it's in there specifically in that write-up for that measure for you. I just don't have it right at my finger. But everything in the base submission matched, and I think it was even greater than what was presented by others through state contract for you.
And then the last thing I had too was I was curious too to what the benefits to the lease purchase is.
I'll defer you to your financial advisor based on Dodd-Frank.
Right. No, I understand. Tom, you have anything else? Or
I dropped something into the chat room, so I'm good.
Brian, none of the options that we would, if we were to choose one of these financing options, none of them would preclude you from being the general contractor. Is that correct?
We're going to build the project. It's a matter of how you want to pay for it. What I don't want to do is have you guys delay having to get to us getting contractors, I'll say, and equipment ordered, windows approaching. I've had clients pay cash. I've had clients finance it with a lease. I've had clients issue separate bonds specifically to the project. You guys did bonds for phase 1 and matched it at that time. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. I was under the impression that the bonds that you borrowed a while back, some of that $10 million was earmarked for this. But we'll talk about that with PFM and what your options are. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think Terry's battery finally died.
Yeah, I see Terry's battery's dropped out. Do we have anything else on this subject? Brian, I think I thank you for your time.
Well, we appreciate your time. We're looking at pneumatics for the upper floors at Horace Mann. That's what I recalled now that was brought up. So I appreciate Cheney chiming in on that. And thank you. Any other questions, please reach out direct or through Jared, and we'll make sure we close the loop and help you get to resolution as to what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Terry's back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, Terry.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Tom, define pneumatics.
There's an air pump and there's a little pipe, and it pushes air around, and and there's the controls. You change the air pressure.
It's pneumatics, right?
Yeah, PN.
Huh?
So it's the way we had to do things before we had low voltage.
Now you've really lost me. Okay.
All right. Well, it sounds like.
Can I chime in real quick?
Sure.
Right, Brian.
It's how the temperature sensors talk to the equipment and tell it what to do. They used to use air pressures. Now we use low voltage wires, like you'd wire a switch to something to talk to it. So that's just how it talks. The pneumatics is going, and Tom made a good point earlier. You get a leak in a building, you start getting your pressures off, then comfort goes to hell. And now you're trying to hunt down leaks in the building where the air is leaking, so you put peppermint in the line so you can try to smell it. So it's time. It's time, guys.
Does that work?
Well, it takes a while, but it smells good.
I guess it would. Thank you.
Terry, if you want to move on. Terry? I see that he's here, but I don't hear him. What do we know about the updated Eisenhower schematics?
Yes, sir. The committee provided them with some additional direction over the past 2 weeks. They were trying to get some stuff to the committee or to the board prior to tonight to present, but they needed some more time. So we were hoping to bring that back to the committee next month.
Well, I'm disappointed. I can't keep this project moving forward. I have nothing to do about it.
I know Mr. Kerr seems to be coming in and out.
I'm here again. Not sure for how long, but
We just briefly, Mr. Carter, I updated the board on the Eisenhower designs, just saying that we provided them some additional direction over the past 2 weeks, and they are working on that. We're unable to bring it to us tonight, but we should have it prior to the next committee meeting for the board to review, and then for discussion in April.
okay, sounds good.
Well, if they were to come in by Monday night, we could bring them into audit and finance, at least introduce them if Terry, if you'll be at the meeting, Terry.
Yeah, I should be. Plan to. All right, move on to number 3, in the East Pike entranceway.
Yeah, we've had this item on as we're working through that project. Right now, Mr. Trout is working with all the contractors on punch list items. Furniture is ordered, and we are working on a plan with the East Pike, the whole, what I would consider the admin team, the guidance counselor, the nurse, the secretary, and the principal, planning their move into the new office, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Just a plan to kind of when to move them, when to get them there, and then how to notify both parents and public as to what the new procedures will be when you come to visit the elementary school. So we are hoping to have that plan in place and them in place in the new office over the next couple of weeks.
Any questions on that? If not, we'll move on to the anything new with transportation update. Sure.
I believe Mr. Travis is here tonight. That is his item. If he has anything he would like to share with the board or the committee.
Yeah, as soon as I was muted, trying to figure out how to get unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep.
Okay. Just a point of information for the board, for the committee members here. We are, I guess it's unfortunate timing that it occurs that things are starting to open back up. Things are getting relaxed. With that, our contractors indicate over the past couple of weeks, they've lost several drivers to other employment. And with that, they're struggling to, they're able to cover their runs, but they're going to be struggling to cover activities. And just as spring sports rolls around, where we're going to be needing a lot of activity buses and things of that nature. So they're working with us. We're able to cover this week, but I'm concerned about the upcoming weeks with reschedules and things like that. We may have to reach out to another contractor to do some activity runs. Just wanted to make the committee aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Anybody have anything for the good of the order?
I just think that was a good meeting. I feel like I've learned a lot. It's been an education, so thank you.
Good. Good.
Really
And
just learned about pneumatic.
There is a lot of information in that report, the Constellation report. So between now and next Monday, I'd suggest reviewing that again and write down any questions or comments that you would have on that. If that's it, I'm signing off. officially.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks,
All right.
Dave. Good night.
See y'all.
Good night, all.
Bye.